Very good afternoon to you and welcome to this special live broadcast in NTV where we delve into the pivotal outcomes of the African Union Commission chairperson election, which is currently going on at the 38th ordinary session of the AU Assembly in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where African heads of state are gathered to decide the next chairperson of the African Union Commission. Now, this is the most powerful position in the AU, shaping Africa's policies on governance, security and trade. We'll be discussing the implications of this election on the broadcast, not just for the African continent, but for Kenya's political landscape as well, as the country approaches the 2027 general elections. Now, joining us in studio this afternoon are three distinguished guests. Former police spokesperson Charles Owino. He is a seasoned security analyst, bringing a wealth of experience in national security as well as governance. Also with us in studio is Kisii Senator Richard Onyonka, as well as international development consultant Dr. Kenneth Kambona. Gentlemen, very many thanks for being with us in studio this afternoon. Now, as we engage in this critical discussion, we'll also bring you live updates and reactions from correspondents stationed in Addis Ababa and across the country, capturing the anticipation ahead of that announcement of the next AUC chair. Do share your reactions with us. We will be sampling them in the course of this live broadcast as we have this discussion. Many thanks, gentlemen, for being with us this afternoon. It's a lot of anticipation across the continent. Really, all eyes on Addis Ababa today on who will be the next AUC chair. Mr. Owino, let's begin with your expectations and whether the process, as is panning out right now, is going according to expectation.
All right, this is an election and it involves all African countries. I suppose 49 out of 56 countries. And anything is possible. Our greatest concern as Kenyans, I don't know whether Senator Onyonka and Dr. Kambona are on the same flip with me, that all of us wished Honorable Raila Odinga well in this election, being a Kenyan. And there is a lot of interest involved regionally and globally, and more so for the sake of our country because of the peace situation in Africa, which is very important for us. But if they all wish him well, my only panic initially was I'm yet to hear from them. My only panic would have been the issue of the SADC countries, that if it is true, they have agreed to vote for our brother from Mauritania? Madagascar, Randria Mandrato. If it is in that agreement, then you know that's about 16 votes, including Tanzania. So 16, if we remove off 49, we are remaining with about 33. Mm-hmm. So 33, then we need that we must have at least 17 on the first round. Mm-hmm. If SADC goes 16, then we must have at least 17 for us to survive to go to the second round. Because if we get less than 17, we get 16, then it means the second person would definitely pick the 17. And if we are out on the first round, then definitely we've lost it. But if we are lucky that SADC, a number of SADC countries, vote for us as we anticipated, including Tanzania being from East African Community, then definitely we have a chance. But I think if we go for second round, then I think I'm definite that Honorable Raila will win.
All right. Yes. And so as we speak, I mean, the heads of state did get into that closed door session. Senator Onyonka, what do you make of this SADC issue, backing Madagascar's candidate? And what does it say about the regional voting blocks in AU politics? Because, I mean, the voting will be, you know, a closed door session. Every country gets to do it, you know, in secret. It's, you know, essentially a secret ballot. But how then do you know that the countries that pledged allegiance in public will actually give their word?
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. The first thing I would like to do is tell my brother Charles that it's true. I today blogged and expressed, indeed, my opinion as to the candidacy of Prime Minister Raila, the AU. And at the same time, being the elected senator of Kisii County, I was actually speaking on behalf of my voters, and we are supporting him. The reason we are doing that, Charles, is because Kisii community has had a relationship with Raila for more than 30 years. And there was a time Raila would come to Kisii and nobody would want to talk to him. It took about 10 years, then he picked up. And after that, Kisii has been voting ODM for the last 5 consecutive times. Either whether it's for president, governor, senator, it has always been ODM. So in reality, we've shared a very long history. Have we had issues and challenges with him? Yes. Have we raised those issues where it was necessary? Yes. Should we? And I'll speak now as a politician and somebody who's a bit older. Should we then now raise the issues which some people would want to raise in terms of he did this, he didn't do that? My opinion is this is Kenya's chance. In terms of the geopolitical diplomacy, in terms of the importance of this issue, it is a matter that all Kenyans are engaged in. I know at the same time, there are right now individuals who are saying, no, Mzee Raila should not go. In fact, he needs to stay in Kenya because we don't know what President William Ruto is going to do. And as far as we are concerned, he's the only one who can manage President Ruto. There are those ones who feel like, no, Raila hasn't done anything. In fact, as far as we are concerned, he could even be the problem because he's been around for too long. The truth is, when I look at Raila, positively or negatively, I think his role he has played, whether you look at from 1980s, come all the way, come to the constitutional fights which were taking place, his role and responsibilities, I think there couldn't have been somebody, even with his very critical mistakes, there couldn't have been somebody who had the capacity or would have the capacity to shake the tree a little bit. Because I remember Museveni told him, and he explained, he said, you're not going to get a job. Can you come out and figure out what to do? Now, I come back to the story, the question you've asked me. Normally, when these elections take place, and at some point I worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, what Madagascar has done is purely strategic. You know what I'm saying? It's like a beautiful lady who's going for a wedding. She knows that there's a certain clan where they are planning to give her family 15 cows, and she'll try and hold back, hoping that somebody will make an offer. Are you with me? Of more cows. Well, let me make a reference. I'm not, and in this case, I'm not talking about bribery. There could be a possibility that the 15 African countries who have held from SADC want to negotiate some of the positions in the commission. Are you with me? So they are waiting to see what, for example, Raila will offer them. Is he going to offer them to have one of their own to be the Secretary of Political Affairs? Are they going to have Raila agreeing one of their members of their countries to become head of infrastructure? You remember that's the position Raila was holding. So these things are being negotiated. They're being negotiated quietly. A lot of influence. I'm twisting. In fact, the complaints that some of us are being told from Addis is that Kenyans are so loud, they are in fact beginning to anger some of the delegations that have come, because previously the history of this exercise was very calm, very quiet. There was no big deal about it. When Faki came, there was nothing big. When Zuma's wife came, there wasn't anything. From Tanzania, Salim Ahmed, who was an incredible diplomat, when he came from Tanzania too, there was no noise per se. There was no excitement as such. But in Addis, now they are saying how Kenyans are arrogant. They have carried 400 of their people who are making noise all over the place, screaming and saying how Raila must win. And you know, sometimes Kenyans don't know diplomacy, we are all that. But it's a good show. And for me, I would wish that Raila is given as good a chance as anybody to manage that body. All
right. Would you agree, Dr. Kambona? Because we have Charles Musa Faki exiting the seat after 8 years in office now, and at a time when the AU has increasingly been called a toothless dog. There's increasing military coups, there's economic turmoil within the continent. So what qualities would you say from the three candidates, Kenya's Raila Odinga included, that are needed in this role now, considering where Africa is?
Thanks, Michelle. And let me just thank my two colleagues, Commissioner Owino and Senator Onyonka, from the purview of issues that they have brought onto the table, and being Kenyans, we are fronting for our own. That's Raila Odinga. But allow me to also give a little spin that I have been working in Djibouti for some time, advising IGAD as a consultant there for the last 3 years. And I've lived in the Djiboutian society. I've interacted once, I think so, with Yusuf in one of the functions. And so as much as they give our Kenyan perspective, allow me to just say, Djiboutians, Djibouti is a very small country, 1 million people. The foreign policy is geared more towards bases. The superpower bases are more of what determines where they lean. So the Americans have their bases there, the Russians, the Chinese, and all these major powers in the world, France, and so on and so forth. And having said that, it is very interesting, and I'll just give one occasion, that during the 2021 Security Council voting, we were again pitted against Djibouti. And to my surprise, Djiboutians admire Kenyans. And they will always tell you, Kenya, Djibouti, one, walal. They call it like that. And so I agree with the two that, you know, we should, at this point in time, if Djiboutians admire us the way they do, they think when you come to Nairobi, you are in another London. When you come to Nairobi, you are in New York. When you come to Nairobi, you get the best medical facilities, etc., etc. And therefore, they look upon us as their bigger brother in one way or another. And why do I bring that point? So I think the candidature of Raila has now exalted that position more than any other time in our history or the history of Africa have we had the discussions going on around the AUC chair as we are hearing now. And therefore, it is important that as Kenyans we stick together, but it's also very important that we also look at things objectively and see, you know, your enemy. Where does Yusuf, where could he, Yusuf, or is it Sadak, or whoever is against, or rather pitted against us, where would they come in such a way that would jeopardize Raila's candidature or win? So I think at this point in time, I agree the Sadak pulling a surprise is something we need to check on. Muslim vote is something we need to check on. The French vote, the French countries voting is something we need to check on. And of course, the DRC Congo voting is something we need to check on. So those are the issues I hope we'll be tackling going forward. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of course, when we began, you say this is an election, you know, and there's a game of numbers, a lot of political diplomacy going on. Kenya has gambled, or well, lobbied heavily, let me not say gambled, lobbied heavily for Raila Odinga. Whether he wins or loses, how effective would you say Kenya's diplomatic strategy has been compared to that of the two other candidates in even, you know, ensuring that the regional politics plays to Kenya's advantage?
One thing, Kenya is a big house compared to the two countries. Madagascar is a smaller country. Even Djibouti, he has just told you, Dr. Kambwana, that he has lived and worked in Djibouti for long. And Djiboutians love Kenya, respect Kenyans, and so on and so forth. But also sometimes, you know, we are in a very strategic location in East Africa, especially when it comes to trade and business. We support a number of countries because most of them are landlocked, whether it is Uganda, even Ethiopia is landlocked after Eritrea went, South Sudan, Central Africa, DRC, all these. So Kenya is a country of interest. Actually, one of our, and I don't know why, Senator Onyonka, you guys are not discussing this seriously in Parliament and Senate. When we were doing Lamu Port, this was a very strategic port for East and Central Africa. There are two major important items which I don't know why they're not discussing. That is Lamu Port and SGR. because we have put in a lot of money. It's one of the things affecting our economy. You know, apart from the port of Coega, I don't know how to pronounce it. It is C-O-E-G-A in South Africa. That is the largest port where we are undertaking shipments in Africa. The next big port would be Lamu, because Kilindini is very narrow. So the larger ships would come to Lamu. And then you remember the corridor which we wanted to have up to Ethiopia and so on. So we are a very strategic country. Djibouti, he has talked about military bases. Kenya equally has that capacity to hold, and I know there are a lot of interest, though we have been resisting quite a number of them. So our geopolitical location in Africa, and more so in Eastern Central Africa, is very, very important. And that is where you find Tanzania try competing with us. They're a larger country. They have the port of Dar es Salaam, but you still find we support much of Western Tanzania on the lakeshore of Victoria, that is Mwanza region, and so on and so forth. So what I'm saying is that our geopolitical location in Africa is very important. And also remember, they are saying there's a lot of noise in Ethiopia. You know, Raila exudes some respect and fear in equal measures within our country. And what has happened is that if you look at the previous chairman, that is Mrs. Zuma, I don't know that to call her Mrs. Zuma.
Jumping. Or even Amina when she was looking.
Yeah, and even the gentleman who was chair from Tanzania and the current chair, you know, they have never been at the level at which Raila has been. Raila has played very important, and Raila has a lot of networking. If you look at the president of South Africa, Ramaphosa, I'm sure he's in a very awkward position today. Because if, for example, it is ANC which directed that they vote a different person, then he's in a very awkward position because Raila is his personal friend.
Right.
So if you look at Congo, Tshisekedi, you find that they have very long-standing relations with Raila. So if you look at Raila as a person in the history of Africa, whether it is West Africa, ECOWAS, whether it is SADC, whether it is Central Africa, he has good networks, and his position also as a prime minister would have played a very big role. He managed to interact with very many presidents within the region. So I think our, whether Raila wins or not, Raila is still Raila.
Right. Yes. He will still be Raila, but you know the question is what this would mean, Onyonka, just before you come in, because he mentions you know, Raila as a person, but when you take a look at the regional voting blocks, so they're just the regional blocks within the African continent. SADC has a history of voting as a bloc. True. However, East Africa's, you know, communities' political alignment is often divided. Even the case of Amina Mohammed, you know, when she was seeking the position. Could this work in Raila, to Raila's disadvantage?
But you see, when Mrs. Zuma was running, Kenya voted for her. When Mr. Faki was running, Kenya voted for him. The reality that you have right now is, I wanted to start where you had first left with Charles's question. Have we managed to do an excellent job to the level whereby that all these regional bodies and regional countries are willing to accept Raila's presidency? In terms of making what I would call the noise, yes, we have made the noise. But because I've worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I'm sure Kambona does, and I'm sure even my brother Charles will agree with us, we a bit made too much noise as we are trying to get this job. We made a mistake when the president pronounced himself on Palestine, when there was a war that has been going on between Israel and Gaza. Those comments affect countries. Like, for example, if you saw, there was a comment the other day that the chairman of the Arab nations is Sisi, who is the Egyptian president, and when everybody had discussed and talked about it, Sisi's position and most of the Arab countries' position is that Kenya's position on the issue of Palestine is actually what has made the Arab countries to pull together and agree to vote as a bloc. So yes, there's some successes we made. I think it was good for Raila to go to Angola. Kenya's had a very good history on Angola. If you remember the independence, Savimbi and other leaders used to come to Nairobi and they would meet Raila and the other leaders. If you look at Namibia, we have a wonderful relationship with them. We chaperoned them during their independence. And this is purely because Kenya has tried historically, diplomatically, to maintain a position of neutrality. And this is where somebody like me would really pray with President William Ruto to make sure that whether he's trying to engage on the matter in Sudan, Sudan itself, not South Sudan, if he decides to deal with the matter of South Sudan, can he try his level best and come up with a neutral position? If you're talking about Congo right now, which is the hottest matter within the Eastern Central Africa or the Great Lakes region, the problems you have there are now a mix between Tshisekedi has been Raila's friend. It was President Uhuru and Honorable Raila who negotiated with Tshisekedi for Nani's son, President Kabila, to actually peacefully transfer power to him. I mean, these are people who know each other. Raila knows the president of Burundi. Even before the current president came into power, Raila was friends with the gentleman who died of COVID, President Nkurunziza. They were friends. So if you look, they're friends with Museveni, they're friends with Kabila. It is much easier for Raila to take the African mode and have, so long as he has got good technical people, he can easily solve the Congolese problem, because the Congolese problem is understood and it needs some older men or older women to sit down and talk to the leadership there and say, gentlemen, you are destroying your countries. Can we agree to amicably solve these issues? So I think to a large extent, Raila's candidature, domestically for Kenyans, as I said earlier, very many people are animated. Some of them are extremely happy. Some are very angry. The truth is the local politics will play very little, other than the fact that some people are now raising the issue and they think that, oh, you know, by Raila going away, it means then Ruto is going to have the Luo vote or other Raila's Kenyan vote, and therefore he's going to be a bad president and is going to continue. My honest suggestion, let us let Mzee go. All right? We can't keep on hoping that it's only Raila who's going to fight for the rights of Kenyans and who's going to stand up. Some people have to stand up and allow President Ruto govern. If he's making mistakes, we'll tell him. And if he doesn't make mistakes, we'll congratulate him. Because we cannot continue hanging on to this argument that, you see, if Raila stays around, then he's going to make it very difficult for Ruto. Ruto will not make any mistakes. No. In fact, if Raila was around, it might even be worse, that they might become such good friends that you would think they're governing together as a unit. How then are we going to handle it? So my opinion is, let Mzee go. Let us, the country, give him the opportunity I think he deserves. Even with his mistakes, I think he deserves to move on, because he would show a good example that Kenyans, wherever we are, we can actually be given an intercontinental responsibility and perform effectively.
Absolutely. I think that ship has sailed now, because, you know, he will find out whether he's getting the seat or not in just a few hours. But Dr. Kambona, so as we speak, of course, we're waiting for the African leaders to, you know, after that closed door session, you know, come up with this decision at the end of the day. But outside of local politics, regional politics, continental politics fueling this decision, major global powers, China, the US, France, have vested interests not just in the African continent, but in the AU leadership as well. There have been complaints of foreign lobbying and indirect influence in this election from these external players. How do you see this impacting, and especially as Campbell for Africa now, impacting the decisions made by the different regional blocs?
Thanks. That's a very good question, and I think it's probably one of those that is going to drive the African Union going forward with the new global world order, as we can see through Trump and the conservative Europe and Asia, you know, changes going on there. Now, let's take Kenya first and foremost, and my colleagues have also alluded to that. Kenya is very strategic when it comes to the Western powers. I mean, you know, just like Djibouti, we have bases here. And business-wise, we are also very, very critical in terms of the multinationals. You know, the major multinationals have their headquarters in Nairobi here. And even the now ending aid, the American aid, US aid, the biggest office other than Egypt was in Nairobi here. We had the majority of employees, either Americans or Kenyans, based here. And Egypt was just a close second, but because of the Middle East issues. So we are very strategic, and Kenya, therefore, holding this position of chairmanship would really be of interest to any Western power, and of course, very importantly right now, because the Western powers are competing almost directly with China, and therefore China is also going to be very keen at seeing what the developments will mean for them. I think the last FOCAC, the forum, the forum which brings Africa and the Chinese government together, the African countries, and was very instrumental or critical about, was very, not critical or instrumental, but was very clear that they want to engage more with Africa. And there's no better place to start than the AU. And then looking at what is happening, Trump pulling out of things like the World Health Organization, the USAID, China is quickly running in to close that gap. And therefore, whoever, and I think both my friends mentioned that, whoever takes that position must be somebody who is a statesman and somebody who can stand for Africa and say, no, yes, we need to work with you, not your help, we need to work with you, but we want to work with you on these conditions, under these conditions. And so China would most likely listen to a statesman who has a background of the kind that Raila has, than maybe a younger person who is just learning from a slightly smaller country and who has no statesmanship to back him up. I think Raila is on a telephone, link to maybe all the presidents in Africa whom I know. I mean, we've just talked about Ramaphosa, whether it's Mnangagwa, whether it is Tshisekedi, and so that is the advantage he brings to this position, if at all he wins, because he has that respect. I don't know whether, and I'm using this very loosely, whether maybe the Rwandese government, knowing the history of the conflict in Eastern Congo and then the genocides, would listen to, if I put the two gentlemen together, I know there's protocols and what have you, Charles will tell me about that very much, but the issue is there's always the issue about the elder statesman talking or deciding on how to resolve issues. A younger person may find it very difficult to negotiate or maneuver, you know, where you have Kagame sitting, where you have Tshisekedi sitting, where you have the elder people sitting, Museveni. Museveni, unfortunately, was outrightly not dismissive, but he said, kuna huyu kijana ambaye alikuja hapa, I'm just quoting him, kuomba kura. He liked him, he said he was a good man, but he still kind of mentioned that, yeah, we need somebody who is grounded on African affairs. And so I think going forward, back to your question, we can play better in the world stage with a Raila chairmanship right now than we can with Yusuf or Richard's chairmanship. That's my take.
Would you agree with that, Mr. Awino, considering that when you look at these external global powers, France, for example, has a deep-rooted relationship with Francophone Africa. Yeah. And Francophone Africa has historically held significant influence within the African Union. Many of the key positions, in fact, have been held by, individuals from Francophone countries. Will this strategic interest, influence this relationship or influence this election towards Francophone countries, or do you foresee a situation where these regional ties, will finally be broken?
The region is a little bit complicated. There's something very controversial I want to talk about. If you look at some African countries on the north, you find they have a lot of connection and networking with Middle East, more than the rest of Africa. In fact, their history is geared towards Middle East. You go to Morocco, you go to Algeria, all those countries, Tunisia, on the top, you find they have a lot of interrelation with Middle East. And a lot of, they don't have very much connection with the rest of Africa. That complicates a bit of issues and excludes them from the rest of Africa. When now you come to Francophone, with time, Francophones are trending to see themselves more of Africa than the relationship they used to have between them and France. If you look at you look at Rwanda, Rwanda has completely somehow moved out of Francophone because President Kagame is even promoting English more than even French. And if you look at the thinking of President Kagame, it's so African unity. I look at the initial imagination of our forefathers who formed the independent Africa, the way they used to imagine having a united Africa and what they want to do. So I don't find Francophone, even if you go to DRC Congo, apart from this small conflict that was coming up, you will find DRC Congo has a lot of networking with us. Well, I think they were Belgium colonized, but French-speaking, much of it. So it's more of a Francophone country in Africa. So you find that the kind of most Francophone countries currently in Africa are starting to look at themselves as more of Africa. The only countries that we still need to work on so many areas are the northern countries, which are identifying themselves with the Middle East. So I don't expect this Francophone affair to affect us so much in this particular election. Actually, what was not earlier foreseen, because we believed that Raila had a very personal relationship with Ramaphosa, is the intrigue of South Africa and political parties. What is the position of ANC on this particular matter? That is the only thing that could somehow interfere with us. But we were thinking that Zambia, Mozambique, we've had very close relationship with South African countries. He has just mentioned Namibia, where we have our late brother Sam Njoma. In fact, it is one of the first countries we even took police to keep peace.
Through Opande.
Yeah, through General Opande. You know of our relationship with Angola, as he puts it, Savimbi. You know our relationship with Mozambique. So we don't have much problems with SADC regions, including Tanzania.
Right.
And you know Tanzania has a history because of Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, his support for South Africa compared to us during Jomo Kenyatta's regime, because we were more capitalists compared to these other people. So I don't see Francophone becoming a very big issue.
Onyeka, do you agree?
Yes, the second issue I wanted to raise is actually the which English word do I use? The allocation or the settlement on who runs is nearly rotational. In other words, if today we had another, for example, if it was the time for the Francophone countries to be represented on the elections, then obviously that becomes an issue automatically. But this time they are not. Then very interestingly, there are those countries, but there are about five, Mali, I think Cote d'Ivoire, there are about 5, I'm not sure what they are. Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea, those countries Gabon, that are, yes. Yeah. Those are countries that are actually Francophone, but very interestingly, all of them have been suspended from voting. And the reality for that, it actually makes Raila's chances better. All right, for the reason that now the numbers became less, for the simple reason that those countries, the AU Commission determined that they were not going to be involved in the voting and everything. Number 2, the decision on whether it's going to be a French candidate or an Anglophone candidate, in other words, an English-speaking candidate, normally that's determined ahead. All right, but when the candidates are running, if you are multilingual or bilingual, if like you notice the Djibouti minister,
yes,
he's good in French, he's good in Arabic, he's good in Somali, he's good in English, and he even speaks some of this Ethiopian language. Yeah. So, Amharic. So where you have is that when you have somebody who's bilingual, that way it is assumed that it's an advantage. But it may not be an advantage in that it is acceptable that within the UN, within the AU Charter, that anybody who's going to run for the chairman does not necessarily have to speak French because they have people will interpret. Most of the information and data is printed out in all the languages, so it's not really a big issue that somebody would use against. It only makes it better. But again, like we said, Raila has been meeting all these. Tshisekedi is French-speaking, yes, but he grew up in Nairobi. I mean, you look at Paul Kagame, he grew up in Nairobi before he went and joined the Ugandan army and went over and took over Rwanda. If you look at, there's a president from Malawi who went to school in Kenya. There is a possibility that interpersonal engagement is going to make it easier for Raila to negotiate and persuade the other African presidents to vote for him. Yes. And also the other thing I wanted to say is that, Charles, how I wish that President William Ruto would be, the way he has pushed Raila's candidacy, he would just be running the country like that. I mean, he has run like a horse on steroids. I mean, I have seen all our, when Kenya wanted to hold the Africa Cup, I've seen when, I have never felt so much engagement, publicly or otherwise, on this issue. And it's because the government has really been singing on it. I mean, my colleagues are really, really excited because they are literally singing songs in Addis Ababa, you know, happy that their candidate will win. And I hope that even if it is announced that he will win, or if it's announced that he will lose, I hope they behave themselves and don't start screaming in Addis Ababa, Maandamano with sufurias.
Right, Dr. Kambona. Yeah. So that is the expectation, of course, that yes, Kenya has campaigned heavily for Raila Odinga. That yeah, he's a statesman with lots of connections with different heads of state, even with the international players. The likes of the US, Russia, France as well. But when it comes to local politics, so the question is, will he get it or will he not? Let's talk about the outcomes. Either outcome, really, at the end of the day, which we'll be finding out by maybe about 7 p.m. tonight. Yeah. What will a win for Raila Odinga mean for Kenya on the political front?
Okay. I know we have a senior politician here, so but I'll start off. But even before I get there, allow me to just speak on the francophone, the French language. I stayed in Djibouti is a French-speaking country, and I don't speak. I speak very little French. I speak very good German, but very little French. But you can, like Senator said, you can get your way around nowadays with all these translations and what have you. So that may not be an advantage, a very serious advantage. Save the cultural issues that, maybe Djibouti being francophone could be trading with Chad, which is francophone, the trade issues and what have you. But that's on the table. That's fine. Now, the other two things that I wanted to talk about, that and Senator has just said that President Ruto has put his best foot forward this time. But I think in addition to that, I think we are getting a very powerful finish. That's what we lacked in the last administration's push for Amina. What does the powerful finish means? Negotiating with the presidents even on the last day. The last president, during the day of the voting, went, I think, in the morning and then voted, and then in the afternoon he was back. And of course he did his part. I'm not saying he didn't do his part. But I think when you call something a strong finish, I think President Ruto has displayed that. The other thing that President Ruto has displayed is to clean your house first, housekeeping. Get your East African community people together. Eat some ugali together and then talk home first. That again lacked in the last attempt we made. So I think with those two, we can say we've really tried to learn from our mistakes or from our gaps that last time. But now coming to the local politics, yes, that is, I really wouldn't want to diminish the importance of this position by delving a lot on the local politics. But since you've asked that, I think number one, yes, because Raila is right now a very key player in our local politics, and he's being fronted there. So his win, either way, will be very instrumental in defining how we move from today, 7 o'clock onwards, in terms of the psyche of the people. I saw some clips of people in Kisumu, almost like, you know, they're already excited. They are already in some kind of frenzy that this thing we are taking. Of course, we understand their frenzy. So you can see the way it is. So that alone is now kind of depolarizing those who are not for Raila as an individual, not as a Kenyan. You know, it's like, that's them and us. So that's very important. You know, some people might not be for Raila as a person, but, you know, that kind of situation makes them feel a little more that Raila should lose. But now coming back, if Raila were to win, then everything would be okay for the current government in terms of, okay, now there are other issues to deal with. But if we want Raila to lose, and I know my colleagues will chime in later, then it again changes the equation. And not that it is happening for the first time. Uhuru Kenyatta, of course, that was not bargained or campaigned for Raila to win the AU High Representative for Infrastructure last time. And then he came and they did the handshake, BBI, and everything was... So Kenya, one day in politics, and Senator Nyonga will tell you, and of course Commissioner Charles is also a politician just like I am, one day in politics is a very long time.
Absolutely, and what you can be sure is that you know, the election, the outcome of this election will definitely have a big implication on local politics. But speaking of the psyche of the people, let's begin our reporter David Muthoka. He's live on the streets of the Nairobi business center, business district rather, as the country and the continent really anticipate the results of the AUC elections. Muthoka, what do Kenyans have to say ahead of that result?
Well, indeed, Michelle Ngele here at Aga Khan Walk, where there is a watch party, Kenyans are waiting with bated breath just to see whether Kenya's candidate in the AUC race, Raila Odinga, will be emerging triumphant at the end of the day. As we understand, sometimes this evening there will be that election and the announcement of the winner, and Raila is facing off Madagascar's Richard Randiamandrato as well as Djibouti's Mohamed Ali Yusuf. And right here at Aga Khan Walk, as you can see, actually, there are hundreds of Kenyans here who've already turned up and are watching closely the events of the day from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And just speaking, I'd like to speak to some of them who've turned up here. This includes local leaders as well as residents as well as members of the youth, just to get their reactions. Asante sana kwa muda wako. Na labda tu tukizamia swala hili, una matarajio gani kuhusiana na uchaguzi unaofanyika kule Addis Ababa?
Asante sana. Kwa majina naitwa Absalom Odhiambo Nyango. Mimi ni MCA kutoka Korogosho Ward. So tuko hapa capital city of Nairobi kuwitness mambo ya Raila Amolo Odinga. Unajua baba amepigania Kenya na amepigania Afrika mzima. Hata ingekuwa zaidi wale watu wangejiuzulu, wawachie Raila achukue wanopose, because mzee akona tajriba ya kufanya hii kazi na apeleke Afrika mbele. Yes.
Wapo wanaosema tu kwamba wangependa Raila asalie humu nchini azidi kumpeleka Rais William Ruto unyo kwa unyo. Na wanamwambia labda asishinde. Wewe unafikiria vipi kuhusiana na hili?
Unajua hao ni watu ambao walipigia William Ruto kura. Wakati tuliwaambia wapigie Raila kura, walikataa. Sasa hii wawezi tuweka na mzigo ati Raila aende anguke ndio kuja akomboe Kenya. Wakati Kenya ilikuwa inakombolewa, tukawaambia tukomboe Kenya, walikuwa wapi? Wale watu ambao wanapiga nduru ndio walichagua William Ruto. Na sisi tunataka tuseme hivi, leo ndio siasa ya Kenya is going to be determined. Tumebakisha masaa ndio tuone mali siasa ya Kenya inaenda. Leo ndio siku siasa ya Kenya inachukua mkondo mahali Kenya inaelekea. Na mtu asidismiss Raila Amolo Odinga, alose, ashinde, itakuwa ni moto. So tunangojea masaa, mambo ilipuke, Kenya ilipuke, Afrika ilipuke. Asante.
Thank you so much. Indeed, as he says, in the next few hours, of course, that fate in the AUC race will be determined. Let me speak to more and more Kenyans here. Labda unaitwa nani na unatarajia nini kutoka kule Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, jioni ya leo?
Kwa majina naitwa John Wanguba Mkoya, kiongozi wa baba wa jeshi la MDD, Movement for Defense of Democracy. Na leo tunatarajia kwamba kule Addis Ababa, baba anapoendelea na kura zake, tunatarajia kwamba baba ataweza kushinda. Na hiyo ndio matumaini ya Wakenya wengi, ambapo sisi wafuasi wa baba tunatarajia kwamba aweze kushinda leo.
Ningependa tu labda nzungumze tu na wenzako hapo, manake tulikuwa tukizungumza pia siku inavyosonga, hata hasa baada ya matokeo ukikaribia tu. Kwa kifupi tu nyinyi wawili, kuna swali ambalo nimeuliza huyu ndugu hapa. Kuna watu wanasema wangependa Raila asalie nchini, asiende Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Wewe unafikiria vipi?
We cannot be on the side of opposing Baba every time. That when he offers himself on the ballot of presidency, we say he's not an option. Now he's had a chance to lead Africa, then we are saying he should come back. Then we should take a stand. Right now, it is for him to take another step, and it's my prayer that he backs this prize. Wale ambao wanasema arudi, baba aliwahi sema siku ile nyingine pale kwamba Raila will not be here all the time. So people will have to learn how to handle their problems. So Baba kuenda, it will be us Kenyans to learn how to deal with our difficulties. It will be like the young eagles who are learning to fly. Lakini kuwa tuna depend kwake kila wakati kwamba akuja atete Kenya, to me it doesn't sit well with me. Let him take the prize.
Thank you so much. Just one more interview as we speak to more and more residents here who've turned out. There's a gentleman here draped with colors of the national flag. Ndugu, una matarajio yepi? Manake imesalia tu saa za kuhesabu tuone mambo ikifanyika pale Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Unatarajia nini?
Mimi matarajio yangu tayari ilianza kuonekana asubuhi, nikianza kuzuka town nzima nikisherehekea juu baba tayari ameshinda. Mimi nataka baba aende afanye kazi. Unajua anapokuwa rais wa Afrika ni mengi yatakuja hapa nchini yetu. Kama rais wa Afrika na umetoka Kenya, politically, socially, economically lazima tutaimarika. That's what I want. Youth watapata kazi. Youth wataka kazi. Youth power. Power. Yes.
Indeed, there are more and more residents here, as you can see, who like to speak, and I'm sure we'll be giving them a chance as the day progresses, because we continue to pitch camp here along the Aga Khan walk. As you can see, there is a truck just a few meters from me back there, and they're actually streaming NTV. Indeed, that tells you that this is a reliable station that residents indeed depend on for breaking news as well as very factual information, especially at a point in time when all eyes are in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Michelle Ngele, do come back to us, because as you can hear, these are residents who are optimistic and would like to give their opinions regarding that AUC race. Ngele, back to you in studio.
Absolutely. Many thanks, David Mwawaka, live for us from Aga Khan Walk at the Nairobi Central Business District, as Kenyans and indeed the entire African continent watches with anticipation the results of that AUC election race currently happening at the 38th AU Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. We're giving you wall-to-wall coverage of the events there with our teams stationed live in Addis Ababa and indeed across the country to give you the immediate reactions of that decision, a historic decision which will be made in the course of the day. Let's take a short break here on the broadcast. Much more still to come. Don't go too far.